Our next speaker needs no introduction. He is the wizard behind the Oz that is this event. Taras Kulish is going to come speak to us about registering and keeping a charity registration. Taras is a member of the Ontario, Quebec, and New York bars. He's been practicing for 25 years and has been helping small and medium-sized businesses and local, national, and international charities. In March 2015, Taras launched the Helping Hand for Ukraine program with Hope, Worldwide Canada, to bring psychological healing to children affected by trauma from the war in eastern Ukraine. In June 2017, Taras also lectured at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv on charity law and international terrorism. So everybody, please welcome Taras.
Well, thank you very much, and you are really to be congratulated because those were not easy presentations. You know, from the Ontario government, there's a lot of information to absorb, and as well from CRA, there's some excellent information. So, just want to congratulate you for listening and learning at this time. Now, I'm the guy who's going to bring you to the Promised Land, and you know, the Promised Land is full of coffee and juice and fruit and all kinds of cookies and as well as some wraps. Now I'm not necessarily talking about the break, although the break is after me, but I'm talking about getting a charitable registration status, but also keeping that charitable registration status. So I'm gonna go through the application process. Now it's important that you understand the application process so that you can also understand when you're on a board and you're a director what you need to do to keep your registration. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So this is right from the application. The first 7 questions of the application are pretty, you could say, innocuous, but there's something that I want to say to you and whenever you fill out any kind of form from the government, you have to answer each question very precisely. And don't think that you can skip over a question because it's going to come back. They're going to be asking you for precision and more information. So, the legal name of the corporation, organization, the full name. If you let's say it's Red Cross International, but everyone knows you as Red Cross, then you have to put, you know, the trade name, the name that you trade under, which would be the shorter name. Any previous names, any previous applications, because they want to know everything, obviously, about who is applying. They want to know about you, and so you have to put down your previous names of the incorporation. Now, something that's very important for churches in particular, or even other organizations, you have to advise if you are a branch or a parish or something of an internal division of a Canadian registered charity. So, if you are an affiliate, let's say, of an international charity, then you don't have to say yes to that box because it's not a Canadian registered charity that you are a branch of. So that's, you know, very important question. Organizational structure. When you submit an application to the CRA, you have to provide a lot of documents, and they want to see everything, and they want to make sure that the documentation is correct and is in order, because it's not just a question of submitting the documents, it's making sure that they are also proper. And so you're submitting your articles of incorporation, your bylaws. You don't have bylaws? Well, then don't submit your application until you get bylaws put in place. And now with the new acts coming in on the federal side, there's a new act, and in Ontario it's transitioning. You're best to get bylaws that are in accordance with the new acts. So if you have a constitution, then you would submit that as well. So organizational structure. They want to understand about the directors and whether the directors are related to one another by blood, marriage, that sort of thing, because that can cause conflicts. So if you're two family members and you want to start a charity and you get a third person, well, you don't meet the below 50% threshold. So if you still want to have two people of your own family on the board of a charity, then you need to get 5 people total, yourselves included, on the board, so 3 more people, so that you meet that threshold. Now, this is the most important part of the application, which is questions 11 to 16. It talks about the activities of the organization. And what I like to say is a poorly drafted activity section is where a potentially good application goes to die. If you don't get this right, you're going to fail. And so I want to take a step back. The 4 heads of charity. What you can be a charitable organization for is relief of poverty, advancement of education, advancement of religion, and other purposes beneficial to the community. So these purposes, one big exception is sports organizations are not deemed to be in that category, strange as it may seem. Your purposes must be exclusively and legally charitable. They have to pass the public benefit test. So that means that it's not just for a couple of people in your community, it has to be for a broader spectrum of people in your community. All your activities then must conform with your purposes. So if you have several purposes, some charities just have one, but some charities might have a few purposes. So then you have to describe for each purpose the corresponding activities. You have to cross-reference them. Okay, so when you're describing your activities, it's like going back to high school. You have to do the W5 and the how, the who, what, when, where, why, and the how. So who will carry out your activity? What will it involve? Where will each activity take place? When, the frequency. Why, what's the purpose, and how. So this is right from the application. This is an example. It's a short example. And I'm going to tell you that this example, if you were to put something similar, you would definitely be asked for more information. But this concise example, and I'll read it, gives you an idea of what they're looking for. So, the purpose, to relieve poverty by operating a soup kitchen. Very simple, and that's from the standard purposes that the CRA will have on their website. The activities in support of the purpose. The organization will operate a soup kitchen at, they give the address, we will offer breakfast, lunch, and dinner 365 days a year. The facility is staffed by 4 volunteers and also provides clothing and other basic necessities to those in need. The soup kitchen services are advertised at local churches and community centers. Okay, nice and concise. It gives you all the who, what, when, where, why, but it does need to be expanded. That's just an example. Okay, you've got to provide a complete description. On the application, you have 2 pages. You can submit more pages. My recommendation is you can keep it nice and concise within the 2 pages. Then if you have activities that are outside of Canada, that's a different section. So sometimes there can be some confusion and you can muddle or melt the 2 together. You need to keep what you do in Canada separate, and then what you do internationally separate as well. So there's a special section that you will describe your international activities. If you are going to be describing international activities, then you need to document this with some paperwork. The most important piece of paperwork is having an international agreement put in place. There's other documentation that you'll need, and I'll touch on some of that, but the most important thing is to put in place an international service agreement that is signed between the 2 parties, between yourself and the organization who will carry out your activities in the other country. Okay, so the type of this is right from the application. They say attach all minutes of meetings. So your annual general meetings, any monthly meetings, you want the minutes in there. Newspaper articles that might have been written about you. Videos, CDs, fundraising material, Well, pamphlets and brochures. Now here's the big one. Other items that further describe the organization's work and purposes. So other items. That can be anything and everything. And so what I always put in is things like, you've got a Facebook page, put it in. You've got a website. I put everything in from your website. If you have a Twitter account, any social media, you put that in. Picture is worth 1,000 words. So why not put 10,000 words? Put pictures in there, okay? So you want and you need to pack in this section your documents. So you attach your documents, and there's a, when I work with a client, it's like a coach-athlete kind of relationship. And so the charity is the athlete. Yes, you have to do work, but I act as your coach. And that's what any specialist will be able to help you with. Okay, so fundraising activities, that's a separate question. You don't put what you're doing as your fundraising activity in with your activities of the charity. Separate section. You've got to describe your fundraising activities, the method, the frequency of events. Now, this is an example right from the application. We will operate a silent auction 4 times per year. 95% of the people involved are volunteers. We will use the internet and email solicitation as a means of ongoing fundraising. No volunteers are involved in this activity. Okay, that one is really short and concise. Use that kind of model. It can be that short. My experience is that you don't have to go as broad as you have to do when you're describing your activities. Keep that short and concise. Do you have a fundraiser, a professional fundraiser? If you think we may have a fundraiser, don't answer yes to this question, because maybe is not definitive. So be very careful when you read each of these questions that you answer it appropriately. But if you are planning to have a professional fundraiser, then you're going to have to give details about who you're hiring. Non-cash gifts. Does the organization intend to receive non-cash gifts on a regular basis? The importance of the word regular. If it's just, well, one guy I know is going to give a painting, well, don't check off regular, okay? Tax shelters. This, in my view, is the biggest trick question on the application. Is the organization currently involved with or have any plans to become involved with a tax shelter arrangement? If you check off yes on this, and first of all, my advice to you is just don't. Don't get involved with tax shelter arrangements and tax shelter schemes. You can get all kinds of people coming up to your charity because they want to use your charity as a money-making machine. And they're going to say, this has been working, we've done this, but my answer to you is don't. Political activities. There are some political activities, a percent that is permitted, but you have to be careful that it doesn't become, that it doesn't consume and take over your charity. If you are asked, for instance, to speak before the House of Commons, that's not a political activity, that's an invitation. Financial information that you have to put on, your proposed budget. The main point that I want to make is we discussed about your purposes. So if you've got 4 purposes, you've got 4 descriptions of activities, and you've got then in your budget component to separate out an amount. You don't just put $30,000 for your activities. If you've got 3 separate heads of charity, you've got to put, let's say, 10,000, 5,000, and 15,000. So you've got to separate it out for each one, and it's as simple as that. But just make sure that you're not lumping everything in together. Now, coming to the end of the application, you might think, phew, we're coming to the end, but the information that is required here is extremely important. Full names, position in charity, president, secretary, treasurer, your full address, your phone number, your occupation, the occupation of each director, your date of birth. If you have anyone on your board of directors who says, I don't want to give my occupation, I don't want to give my date of birth, and then you say, no, we need that information, and they say, no, I don't want to give it, the answer is, no, we can't have you. The Charities Directorate is going to they're not going to refuse your application, but they're going to come back and say, we need it. And so then you have a choice. What are we going to do? Do we have to get a new director at this point in time? So from the beginning, make sure that you get all the information that you need. So now, this is the promised land, becoming a registered charity. A registered charity can issue official donation receipts. That's the biggest thing that charities, why people want a registered charity. Secondly, a registered charity is exempt from paying income tax. There are a number of things that a registered charity must do. I'm not going to get into all of these things. They are in the slide, but you've got to maintain your status as a legal entity. And that's part of why we're here to learn a little bit more about that. So if, unless there's questions, we'll be moving on to the break, but please, are there any questions that anyone might have?
International activities, when you talked about international, how do you define that? Is it, let's say, an organization is helping somebody in Ukraine?
That's international. Okay. If an organization is helping or doing or sending money, that is an international activity. So you have to think, is this a small thing? Is this part of our program? Is this just to help someone? And you have to be careful, because if you're not really doing this as a consistent thing, then just don't do it.
Well, what I wanted, you had mentioned that you need to have a contract. And I guess that's what I'm asking for, is more clarification.
Okay. Well, if you're having an ongoing relationship with an organization to carry out a program, let's say you're sending $50,000, $30,000 or more over to another organization, or it's going to be $5,000 a year, you want to put in a service agreement between the two entities. Even if it's just a one-time thing when you're sending something over, you want to document it, and you want to make sure that everyone knows what they're supposed to do. And
or can you partner with someone who's already doing this activity?
Partnering with somebody or an organization in Canada who is
already has this kind of an agreement in place.
Yes, and that's a good point, Anne. You want to make sure that if you're going to partner with another registered Canadian charity that is already doing international work, you want to do your due diligence and make sure that the charity you're partnering with has the proper type of agreement in place. Okay?
That's a very good point you just mentioned. But wouldn't you be really going for an NGO status instead? If you want to deal with relief of poverty overseas?
Well, in an NGO status, really in Canada we have the not-for-profits, and we have charitable organizations. A charitable organization is a not-for-profit that has achieved the registered status, and so we don't technically have that legal definition of an NGO. That doesn't, in terms of the law and the structures, colloquially it's going to be considered an NGO because it's a non-government organization. For instance, Red Cross is considered an NGO, but that's more the way we describe things. It's not a legal status necessarily.
So as long as you have proper agreement with the foreign entity and the accountability, you are okay to conduct that kind of relationship with the foreign entity without having the NGO status.
Well, if you're a not-for-profit or a charity and you have a service agreement in place that regulates the relationship, yes, then you're going to be okay. But you want to, of course, this is not legal advice. You have to get these things checked over. Anne?
If someone loses their charitable status, can they reapply to get it?
Yes, you can reapply, and remember that was one of the first questions. Have you previously had a registered status? And you have to indicate. So you can reapply, you can regain your status. We had one more question?
Yes, is there a percentage, is there any limitation limitation as to how much you can help internationally and how much you must help domestically? Is there a percentage the government wants?
No, it's a good question. Is there a percentage between that international work and local work? The one thing that you have to make sure is that your organization is not a conduit to an organization overseas. So that's very important. But we've dealt with organizations that have 100% of their mission overseas, and they get their funding from Canada, but they are in control, and that's the key, is the charity in Canada has to be in control of the work, and that's what the agreement regulates. Okay, I think we're really at the end of the question period, but now we are at the beginning of the break, and Hanedi, how long do we have?
We have 10 minutes.
So we have a 10-minute break. There's great cookies out there, fruit and juice, so please by all means.